Hi, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Bree. Today's video, we're going through all the books I read in the month of March. I have 12 books to talk to you about, and I don't think I really made any reading vlogs for these. Maybe there was one. I don't think I have any, so it might be a longer video chat with you about all the books that I read. I had some hits, and then actually a lot of mid-range, like 3-star books this month. So let's just get into the video. So I think we're going to start with my 3-star books, and well, 2.5 to 3.5 star books this month. I have a bit of them to talk to you about, so I just want to get over with the ones that I have a little less fond thoughts of and talk to you about those. So we'll start with my lowest rated one, which is unfortunate because it's a Kingfisher, and that's Bryony and Roses. This is a self-published work that she published back in 2017, and this is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. And in this, we're following a beast who's in a castle and a young woman, Bryony, who gets trapped in the castle, and she has to try to figure out what's going on so that her and the beast can escape. And overall, it wasn't the longest book ever, but I just found it really boring. I listened to it on audiobook, and I do like the humor that T. Kingfisher always brings in. I do feel like it was present in here, but I think the overall story itself was just a little lackluster. We have some subversions of the Beauty and the Beast trope, which I liked, but this really focuses on a love of gardening, and I do love gardening as well, so I was expecting to really enjoy this, but instead I think it just, I don't know, didn't feel cohesive, and it didn't feel as immersive as I've come to know T. Kingfisher. Now, this is a self-published work. It's been a while since this is published, so I don't know if she got it self-published now, if there would be changes or anything like that, but it is unfortunately my least favorite T. Kingfisher, and I don't have a ton of things to say about it. I do always recommend the audiobooks. I do feel like she always has really good audiobook narrators for her stories where that really make the humor come across, but in this, the story itself fell flat for me. So I think I gave it about 2.5 stars, which is unfortunate. And then this one I don't have physically, but I read also on audiobook, and that's Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. I read a lot of fantasy this month, and you will see that when we get to all the other books, and I was just really feeling like I needed a palate cleanser. I needed something else that was just going to be fun and distracting, and I have heard about Magnolia Park's universe for a long time. I didn't know if it would be for me, but I just was like, you know what, I just want some drama. I started watching Gossip Girl, so I thought, you know what, this is the best time for it. Honestly, I'm in the middle on it. I gave it 3 stars. This is a story where we're following a woman, Magnolia, and her ex-boyfriend BJ, and they are in their like 20s. They're like young 20s, and they're both very, very rich, and they just are in the UK, and they're doing really rich people things. And they used to date, but BJ cheated on Magnolia, and ever since then they have not dated, but they sleep in the same bed like almost every night, and they still act a lot like boyfriend and girlfriend, but BJ sleeps with other women all the time and is always hurting Magnolia in that way. And also Magnolia is like serial dating guys, so she will date guys but kind of lead them on, and then she's clearly still obsessed with BJ. So they have this very toxic relationship, and I've heard people either give it like 5 stars or 1 stars, like they're either obsessed with it or they hate it and see all the problematic things. And I just think I fall in the middle. I had fun with the drama. I think it gets a little repetitive, and which is why it's a 3-star. It is a lot of the same problems over and over again. But I can't lie, it did suck me in a lot of times. Like, it was high angst and drama, and these 2 people are not good people. Like, I don't think you're supposed to think that they're the best people in the world. They hurt each other and they hurt other people all the time. But I just had a good time. It felt like, people say it's like watching Chuck and Blair, and they've never been my favorite couple either in the shows. But for what it was, I had a fun time. I don't think I ended the book feeling like, oh my gosh, Magnolia and BJ need to be together. I need to see them together. And I didn't end the book hating them either and thinking these are the worst people ever. So take with that what you will. I know you don't really come here for romance recommendations, so I'm not really worried that I'm gonna steer people wrong in that direction. But yeah, it was an entertaining time. If you want something that's just entertaining, I would recommend. Although I do think look up trigger warnings along with every book that I talk about. Always look up trigger warnings if you need it. But in this one specifically, we have a lot of to do with like drug overdose and addiction and things like that, so just know that. Obviously there's cheating as well. if that's a sensitivity to you. But I also felt like, I don't know, because it was so high drama, I didn't feel like the cheating trope, which is something I don't like to read about, wasn't very triggering to me, because it was just like so over the top and high drama that it just like negated it somehow for me. But anyway, let's move on to the next book. I picked up this nonfiction for, well, one, I've been trying to read 12 nonfictions in the year, and this will be my 4th one, so I'm doing really well with it. But also, my friend lent it to me because we had been talking about it at work, and she had the book, and so I read it so we could talk about it. And that is Utopia for Realists by Rutger Bregman. This is, I think, translated from Dutch. If not, I know he's like a Dutch writer. Yeah, it's translated from the Dutch by Elizabeth Manton. So this is a book that essentially talks about having a universal basic income and a 15-hour work week, and then also open borders, and all this to create a better society than what we have now. I think that this book is a good book if like you are just being introduced to capitalism and late stage capitalism and what that means. I think it was a beginner book in that regard. He spends most of the book, like I would say at least over half, talking about universal basic income. Then we touch on a 15-hour work week, and the open borders to me felt like such a little tiny piece. Like he really didn't expand on that at all. I also think that this book is very centrist. It doesn't really go left or right. Now it's coming from a global perspective too, so although he talks about the US a lot, it's not a US specific book, so I feel like many countries could get something out of this if you are reading from a different country. But overall, I thought it was a good introduction, but at the same time I have problems with it. For one, my biggest critique is that while he touches on race and gender and things like that, he really boils down the whole problem to be rich versus poor, which in some instances I can see his logic and I agree with, but I think that he tries to make such a nuanced topic seem very simple. And also, I am sick and tired, and sorry if I get a little heated on this, but I'm sick and tired of reading books that just completely dismiss disability. Not once in here, except for in 2 passing times, does he mention disability, and they are very like small part of the sentence. It's like a mention of disability, like what's it called in the US? Being on disability, you get like money for that. He mentions that in passing once, and then another time at the end of the book does he mention somewhat disability, but they are very small instances, and I am sick of books talking about this kind of topic and leaving out disability. Also, I would argue that he leaves out race and gender a lot as well and simplifies it, but my biggest thing was the disability, because he talks a lot about how essentially if we give a universal basic income, that people actually work harder and they want to earn that money. They don't just want free handouts, which is in the USA a very big topic of contention for people to give a basic universal income, is that people will just be lazy and not work, and he's trying to show that that is not actually true. But when you have that argument and then you leave out disability for people who need support and cannot work or can do very limited work, I think that you are leaving out a big section of people in this country and all over the world that deserve a representation in your argument here. And that upset me as a disabled person. So yeah, I don't usually talk about that a lot, not for any other reason than it's just like a personal topic to me, so I do get heated on it. So yeah, that was my biggest critique. I would give it 3 stars. I think if you have never heard of capitalism and you want to check this out, I think it's good. I just wish he also went more into the other topics. Like, he touches on 2 things, but I think if he had just made it about basic universal income and then did separate books for the others, his arguments for those would have been stronger, but they felt kind of misplaced in the grand scheme of things. And he also tries to remain centrist, but then goes on like a rant about the left at the end, which I found very strange. So 3 stars for me. Then we had another palette cleanser. I'm just trying to get the palette cleansers out of the way here. I also needed a palette cleanser. I just wasn't feeling full fantasy again. And this is a book I've heard about a lot, but it's YA, so I never really picked it up because I don't always love YA. But I decided to give it a try, and that's Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco. This is a series of 4 books, and it's a historical like horror mystery series that's YA. And I had a good time with this. I think while 3 stars for me can mean 2 things. 3 stars can mean it was kind of a disappointment and I still enjoyed it, but I didn't like love it. Or it can just mean it was a palate cleanser book and I had a fun time with it, and it's not anything that I would scream and cry about, and it's not something I hate. And this fell into that category. It was good. I had a good time. We follow a young girl who is trying to train under her uncle to become a like medical person. So she's trying to learn how to like dissect bodies and learn about them. This is set in the 1800s. I think it was like 1888, whenever Jack the Ripper was around. And it's set in London, 1888. Wow, I was right. And she is also trying to get away from her father, who's very controlling of her and doesn't want her to do this stuff. But her uncle allows her to learn under him, and then one day the Jack the Ripper cases start and she gets involved in figuring out what's happening. And while I think some of the twists and turns were very obvious as a person who reads a lot of horror and has read a lot of mystery as well, I still found it fun. I think it was actually grosser than I thought it was going to be. Like, for a YA, it really does get into like the dissecting part, which I wasn't really expecting. And I really do like a historical mystery series, so I think I'm going to continue on with this series, and just I'm having fun with it. It kind of reminds me of a YA version of the Diana Raybourn series, A Curious Beginning. Is that the first one? The Veronica Speedwell series, but make it like more horror and make it darker. I think it's a fun premise too, because you're dealing with historical figures. So the next one is like hunting Prince Dracula. So it all has to do with different historical figures in this time period, and I think that that is fun, and I would recommend. I think it was like a good time, a good palate cleanser, definitely horror, so know that if you are not someone who likes horror, I don't know if I would recommend this. And a fun mystery, and there's a bit of romance between her and this other apprentice of her uncle, and I liked how that evolved, and I just think it was a good time. So I'd recommend 3 stars. This is Strange Beasts by Susan J. Morris. I picked this up on a whim at Barnes & Noble, and it sounded really good. It says it's a fresh yet familiar gothic tale, part historical fantasy, part puzzle box mystery. The worlds of Dracula and Sherlock Holmes collide in a thrilling exploration of feminine power. So we basically have a woman who is the descendant of Van Helsing, and also a woman who is Moriarty's daughter. Van Helsing's daughter, Samantha, she is like an investigator, but she works like mainly with the books. Like, she researches a lot. She hasn't gone in the field. And Helena, Moriarty, she is in the field as like a field agent, and she hunts monsters and she solves these mysteries. Samantha decides to convince her boss to let her go with Helena to solve this mystery because it's something that is personal to her, and there's someone killing people in Paris in these very gruesome ways. I think I'm finding that I like historical fantasy, and I like historical mystery, and I like fantasy, and I like mystery, but I don't know if historical fantasy mystery is really working for me, because I think it divided too many things. Like, I either wanted more world building and more like diving into monsters and the lore and things like that, or I wanted it to just be more of a mystery. And it did feel like mostly a mystery, but the mystery wasn't like the strongest part. It was just like juggling too many things that, for me personally, I think doesn't really work. I feel like last month or the month before, both of them, I've had fantasy mystery, and I feel like I end up rating them like 3 stars, which is what I'm giving this. They do things that I like, but in combination don't work as well as I want them to, if that makes sense. I feel like we were juggling like a larger scale plot with this micro plot of the murders happening. While things tied together, I think it got a little convoluted, and the magic itself and how the magic works and all the monsters, I just think we didn't dive enough into them. I think if we had dived more into them because we were really focusing on the fantasy, then maybe I could have really loved it. But unfortunately, it was a 3 star. It dragged a little bit too. I think also if it had been like 100 pages shorter, then some of the filler things that were in there could have condensed, and we could have had a faster paced mystery. And I think the dragging on from it made it a little long. I just think that for me personally, it didn't work quite for my taste. But if you were someone who loves like a fantasy mystery, maybe give it a shot. Then we have a disappointment, and I gave it 3 stars, and I think that that's like a fair rating for it, but it is a little bit of a disappointment for me personally. If I was rating disappointments on a scale of 1 to 5, I'd probably put it at like a 2 star for disappointment, but for an actual book, it's a 3. But I think I just had such high hopes because I loved the first one, and that's Realm of Ash by Tasha Suri. I read Empire of Sand in January, and I absolutely loved it, and this one just didn't quite capture the magic that the first one had. It is very long. It's longer than I think the first one, and I think you feel that. I did enjoy our main character. I've heard some critiques about Arwa being like more of a passive character than, I'm forgetting the character of the first one, but she was just a much more like strong kind of fights back character, and Arwa is a bit more passive. And it wasn't that for me as much as it was the length, and the story just carried on. It was very slow and meticulous, and I think something about these books is that they are very heartbreaking. There's a lot of like hardship that our characters have to go through to get to the end. A lot of times when you feel hope is lost, but then they still find hope along the way. The first one just captured that feeling so well, and this one just made it drag a little bit more. Again, a common critique of the other one was that it was a little too long, and I think if we had cut this down by like this much, probably 200 pages, I think it could have been more impactful. We're following Arwa as she is a widow, and then she ends up going to the castle where she's going to help figure out what's going on with like the magic of the world and things. So this is following directly after the events of the first one, and she also is using magic that people don't really know about, and she ends up helping the prince who's he's a illegitimate son of the king, so he's treated really poorly, and he basically is investigating the things that are happening, and he's trying to find a solution, and they are racing against the clock. They have a lot of political turmoil happening as well. The couple as well. It worked for me, but it was a lot slower of a build, and the payoff just didn't feel as much for me because of the length. So I don't know if I was coherent on that one, but that's Realm of Ash. I gave it 3 stars. And then the last 3-star book I have is The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. And the interesting thing is this is a 3.5 star. I think 3.5 star. For like a good half of it, wasn't sure if I would continue. And then the last half, I ordered the next 2 books because I need to know what happens. So this is kind of hard to explain, and I think that's why it didn't suck me in right away, because there was a lot going on with it at the beginning. We're following a couple different characters. We follow someone who is on the Imperial Island, and she is the daughter of the Emperor, and she is doing some kind of magic where there are like constructs, they call them, that the king has created, and he puts his magic into them, and then they are like spies for him and things like that. And she's learning that kind of magic, and she's trying to gain his trust and things so that she might one day become the empress. And he is a difficult emperor to work with, to say the least. And then we're following a guy who is Jovis, who smuggles things across borders and things like that, and he used to be part of the army, but he now just smuggles things, and he often now is getting known as someone who smuggles kids, because everybody in the realm, when they're a kid at a certain birthday, get like a bone taken out from their ear and given to the kingdom, and that is used for the magic. And everybody does this, no one can get out of it, but it can be dangerous and people can die from it. And so he is often like smuggling now kids out of the realm so that they don't get their bone shard taken away. And then we follow a third perspective, I want to say, that we don't really understand how that one fits in, but is another like young woman who is somewhere else in the realm and is kind of confused. But mainly it's Lynn and Jovis, and then we see things like coming together. It was something where I think I've learned in books that I don't think for fantasy, one of the high fantasy problems I think I've had is I don't necessarily love books where we are following multiple characters all over a vast continent and we don't see how they connect. And I know that usually eventually they come together and they end up connecting, but I think it leaves me bored and confused for like 90% of the book. And then I like when they come together and they can work together. So I was thinking about it because I read the Joe Abercrombie, The Blade Itself, and they were apart for most of the book and I didn't really care. And I've had other books like that, but then I was thinking like City of Brass worked so well because they come together very quickly and you see them having to interact with each other. And I prefer when we get different points of view to see them interacting and getting like their perspective after the fact. So like sometimes you'll read a section of the book and it'll be from a person's perspective, and then they'll leave that situation and I'll pop over to like the other person's perspective who was in the room during that, and then you get their thoughts afterwards. And I really like that with stories, but these kind of stories, everyone's disjointed, so you're not really sure how things connect. I hope that's making sense, but I think that that was a light bulb moment for me in terms of what I might like in high fantasy, because this didn't work for a good chunk of it. But then we start to see characters come together, we see how things are going to play out, and I started to enjoy it a lot. And we also have animal companions, and I'm a sucker for an animal companion, and they made these ones really cute. I looked up character art and they essentially look like beaver dogs with seals, mixed with seals, and they are so cute. So that got me. It really did. I'm not gonna lie, it got me a lot, and we're gonna deal with more of that. And I think that the twists and turns that the story took, especially with the magic and with what's really going on in the castle, I thought was so interesting. You start to see how the characters are going to have to come together, and I think that that's really interesting. So it's propelling me to want to know more about what's going to happen in the upcoming books, and I need a character with animal companions. Like, I just want to read about that. So it's a 3.5 star, but I will be continuing on this series. I'll tell you real quick. Out of this stack, well, this is finished a series. This and these 3 are starting series. And I think I'll continue this one and I'll continue this one, but I don't think I'll continue on the Strange Beasts series. So, in case you were wondering, that is what I will continue on with. And then let's get to my 4 stars, and then we'll get to my 2 5 stars of the month. So these are my 4 stars of the month. We'll start with the nonfiction. This is the 4th nonfiction. I guess that was the 4th. This was the 3rd nonfiction I've read. And this is They Can't Kill Us Till They Kill Us by Hanif Abdurraqib. And this is the 2nd book I've read by him. I read A Little Devil in America, which I actually think I should have maybe started here, because I think this one is really good, but I think A Little Devil in America was just like perfect. So to go from that one to this one, I enjoyed this one less because of the high hope I had from the first one, but this one actually is his first book. So this is a collection of essays that he wrote a long time ago, and then he's fitting into a book, and he actually has parts where he says his thoughts on not trying to change a lot of what he wrote because he wanted to keep it relevant to his feelings then, but also kind of updating it to fit in this collection. So it just felt a little more disjointed than A Little Devil in America. A Little Devil in America has like a clear point. It's talking about Black performance, it's talking about race, history, culture, and a memoir all in one, and you really get the feeling that he had something to say with that throughout the whole thing. This is a lot of his feelings, and it is memoir-like. You definitely get a lot of his personal experience, but it is just feels a little more like he's coming up with all these ideas that he will then make books into. So then he has another nonfiction that is about basketball, and in here we touch on basketball a couple times, and I think that the basketball one is going to feel also a little more together because he has like a clearer point with it, and I think this was a great like starting book. I gave it 4 stars, by the way. He really writes in a way that really sucks you in. It's very easy to get into, fall into, and I really like learning something through a memoir lens. I think that it makes the learning more human when you get to have a piece of fact or information thrown out at you and then get the personal experience behind it. I think it really like lends itself to better learning and better empathy and things like that. And I really like this. And he actually narrates this one himself, and I did like hearing it because also when he narrates how he like changed certain things or didn't change certain things, it feels like he's just talking to you. Like it feels like he's having a conversation or like a podcast or something, and I really liked that about it. So I would highly recommend him as an author, but also this one as well. I just think that it might be a better place to start here if you want to see like what he might be bringing to the other books that he writes, like what kind of topics he might dive into at some point. Sorry, Kaladin's crying. I think that this is a good starting place, and then A Little Devil in America is like my favorite one so far. But I will be trying to read the basketball one too, even though I don't really have a huge interest in basketball. I think he could make me interested in about anything he has to write. So, and then I'm just going to talk about these 2 in tandem because they are part of a series. So I have these Infinite Threads, which is the 2nd, and this is All This Twisted Glory, which is the 3rd in the This Woven Kingdom series. Sorry, they're so shiny, they're hard to see. But these are 2 books that are in a YA romantasy what am I saying? It's not a duology series that we follow a princess and a prince. The princess is the long lost heir to the Jin throne, and the prince sees her one day and decides that she's a spy, and he wants to find anything out about her. And things start happening that involves them 2 in a bigger plot, and then we bring a 3rd character in, and these 2 actually take place somewhat in the kingdom that we first see, but mostly in another kingdom, and we get to expand on the world and the politics and the magic system a little bit more. We also get to see Aliza's like character development a bit more. I feel like in the first one, we got a lot of the Prince Cameron's point of view, and we got to get to know him a little bit more, but Aliza still felt like a character we were still getting to know, and I feel like these 2 really brought out her personality a bit more, and the character that was added at the end of the book, we get to know a little bit more about him and his backstory, and I really like his story, and I gave them both 4 stars. They're just such a fun time. They are not too serious. They are so like lyrical and dramatic, and they kind of feel like a very vivid tale. Like it just sweeps you away, but at the same time they're kind of angsty and not a lot happens in them, but they're so fun. So I'm having a great time. I would highly recommend the series if you want something that's just like a fun romantic time. There's a lot of yearning in these books. A lot of yearning. So if you're looking for something like that, I'm having a good time with them. I think the 4th book comes out in September. And then finally, we have my 2 5-stars of the month. So let's talk about Blood Over Brighthaven by Emma Wang. I picked this up because I've heard so many people talk about it. It's on so many people's best books of the year, and I started reading it on audiobook, and I knew I needed to get it because I just couldn't stop reading it. It was so good. It was heartbreaking. Whenever you see people crying over this book, like legitimately made me sob. We are following a young woman who is trying to become part of like the Mages Society, and she's at the beginning of the book testing in, and she is going to be the first woman to be a part of this mage program, and they basically run the government, run the city. And then we have people who come from this like areas outside of the city, and it's walled off, and they are immigrants to this place because they are being displaced by their hometown. There's something called the Blight happening that is killing a lot of people, and we're following Tummel, who is one of those characters, and he has come over from the other area, and he and Siona end up having to work together, and they start unraveling things about this city and the magic and things like that that is very disturbing. And I think this is a book that kind of hits you over the head with its themes. It definitely talks about power and privilege and the corruption of people and treating people as less than so that you can get more from them. There's a lot of really hard-hitting conversations in here, and Siona is an infuriating character. She's a character at the very beginning that's very ignorant to a lot of things happening. It's talking a lot about how people can be a part of an oppressed group but still benefit from privilege. So in this case, it's a lot like white women. We can be oppressed because we are women, but we can also benefit from the fact that we are white, and we can also use that privilege and power in a negative way. And this really dives into that. She has a lot of anger against men for like really good reasons, and women are treated very poorly, but she has so many other things that she just doesn't question and doesn't see the flaws in her logic. And we watch her starting to learn about something that she had ignored for a really long time, and it is devastating in so many ways, but it was such a good book. And I think if you're someone who doesn't like the themes like hitting you over the head, you want something a little more subtle, maybe you won't like this, but it really worked for me. I think if you liked Babel a lot, you could really like this as well. So I think it's very popular and for good reason, and I'm very glad that it's getting like traditionally published. Well, this is the traditionally published, but it was self-published and now it is traditionally published, and I think it's great that Emma Wang is getting that recognition. I just wish I didn't have to get the sprayed edges because I know this might be an unpopular opinion, but I don't like special editions. I don't like the sprayed edges. I don't like that you can now tell that I've read the book because it starts to separate. I know that's a side tangent, but it's my only critique. And finally, my last 5-star is The Berry Pickers by Amanda Peters. This is a literary fiction that's kind of historical fiction too. I tend to pick up a literary fiction and I categorize it as literary fiction, but upon reflection, I think is more historical fiction, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. This one is set in 1962, so that's where I'm saying historical fiction, and we're following a family who work on this berry farm in Maine, and they're part of the Mi'kmaq tribe, and they cross between Nova Scotia to Maine every year to do berry picking, and they go and their whole family picks berries, and they get paid, and they have this like place that they stay. They one day are there in 1962, and their youngest daughter, Ruthie, goes missing, and they can never find her. So we're following Joe, who is like one of the younger brothers of Ruthie. We're following his story where he's recounting that day when Ruthie went missing, and then it's all the way up to his present day, and he is, you know, at the beginning of the book he's dying, and you see him go back in time and kind of replay the events. And then we're following a young woman, Norma, and we are following her as she's with this family, and she's recounting her experience growing up in this family as an only child, and her mom was very controlling of her, and slowly she starts to realize things about her family that she had noticed things were off, but as she gets older she realizes just like how much they were hiding from her. And this might be a spoiler, so if you don't want like any kind of spoiler, You can skip ahead. I'll put a timestamp, but I don't think it's the most, like, this is a literary fiction. It's not a mystery, so I don't feel like it's meant to be hidden from you. I think it's meant to be pretty obvious, but it's very obvious to me from the beginning that Norma is Ruthie and that we're following Ruthie's story as she's slowly realizing that she was kidnapped, and it's about how something like this, an event like this, can rip a family apart and just like how much it impacts them. Like they go through so much tragedy and they have so much hope as well throughout this whole thing, but just like the weight of losing your younger sister or losing a family member like never really leaves you, and how different people grieve in different ways. Some people just want to move forward with their life and don't have a lot of hope of ever seeing Ruthie again, and some family members really believe she's still out there and that one day they will find her. And it was just a very powerful story about family and about the bonds that tie us and how much trauma something like this causes. But it was also a very like hopeful story, and you just want them to see each other again, and I loved it so much. It was 5 stars. I will be picking up the next Amanda Peters that comes out. I believe there's another one coming out very soon. I think it was so good. It also interweaves a lot about being Indigenous in this area, in this time period. There's a little bit about the 60s scoop. This does take place during the 60s scoop, which is when a lot of Indigenous folks were taken to residential camps or residential schools, and they talk a little bit about the trauma from that. Some of the family members were forced into this and have come home, but it's also just a family story. Like there's just so much you can get out of this, and I would highly recommend it if you're someone who likes historical fiction, literary fiction, or just looking to read outside your comfort zone. I think that this is a really, really great story, and I love every minute of it. Although it was a hard story to read at points. But also this cover. Isn't that beautiful? So if I haven't convinced you, I don't know what will. There you go. There are all the books I read in the month of March. I hope you had a great month, and if you want to leave below what your favorite book of the month was, I'd love to hear it. Also, if you want to leave a berry emoji down below, I would love to see it. And I thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.